In this episode, we talk about the collapse of a decades-old pedestrian bridge at a popular monsoon site in Pune, which left 4 dead and many injured. We also talk about the official announcement of India's next census, now scheduled for 2027. But we begin today by discussing the ongoing investigation into the Air India plane. Hi, I'm Ichha Sharma, and you're listening to 3 Things, the Indian Express news show. Since last week, speculation has been rife about what led to the tragic crash of the Air India Boeing 787 Dreamliner, which was headed to London and ended up killing 241 people on board, all but the one lone survivor. Everyone from aviation experts and former pilots to airline officials has been weighing in, offering theories about what might have gone wrong.
क्या अहमदाबाद में जो प्लेन क्रैश हुआ, इस प्लेन के क्रैश होने के चांसेस पहले से ही थे?
संभावना लगती है कि इसमें हो सकता है कि तकनीकी खराबी हो, इलेक्ट्रिक फेलियर हो गया हो.
If the airplane loses lift while the gear is down at that slow speed, it's going to do exactly what you saw on the video, which is it's going to...
But it turns out it will be a while before we get any concrete answers, given how long air crash investigations typically take. Now, to discuss what that process involves and what we actually know so far, my colleague Shashank Bhargava speaks to the Indian Express's Sukalp Sharma, who has been reporting on the case for the paper.
Sukalp, first begin by telling us who all are involved in the investigation of this crash right now.
So, Shashank, considering this is a serious air accident, it is the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau of India which is already leading the probe. And because it was a Boeing aircraft, the engines on the aircraft belonged to GE or were manufactured by GE. So the AIB will also take necessary inputs and assistance from the US National Transportation Safety Board, the US Federal Aviation Administration, which is the foremost aviation regulator in the world. Of course, Boeing, GE, and there may be others as well. They can co-opt technical experts, subject matter experts to look at various aspects. UK's AAIB would also be involved, as a number of the victims were British nationals. So they have also sent a team to assist the AAIB. So that's the stage where we are at now.
And right now there are a lot of unanswered questions, right? We don't know what exactly went wrong. Talk about how long will it be before we find out the answers to these questions?
Well, that's anybody's guess at this stage. As per the procedure, the AIB should finalize a report within a year, and there could be a preliminary report earlier than that. But we're not certain at this stage whether a preliminary report will be released or at what stage it would be released. Modern aircraft are extremely complicated and sophisticated machines, and the investigation itself is a fairly complicated, long-drawn, and a highly process-driven exercise. From collecting evidence at the crash site and other sources, analyzing flight data, conducting interviews of witnesses, of there is a lone survivor in this case, of airline staff, air traffic controllers. There are a lot of people that they have to go through. There are a lot of documents that they have to go through. Then closely examining the components that have been recovered from the aircraft debris, running forensic analysis, testing potentially faulty equipment, using test benches, which may or may not be located in India. Some components might have to be sent overseas for test bench testing, if at all that is required. And then they arrive at some sort of conclusion. Then there is a consultation exercise with the various stakeholders, considering there are foreign regulators and foreign accident investigation agencies also assisting the AIB. Their views will have to be taken into account. All that has to be recorded. All that has to be analyzed, discussed. And then they come out with a final investigation report. Sometimes even at the end of the year, they might not be able to conclusively point at the causes. There have been instances in other parts of the world where air crash investigations have gone on for years. Because these are very, very sophisticated machines, and usually it's not just one factor, it's a combination of causes, one thing leading to the other that go wrong.
And this was the deadliest disaster involving an Indian airline in decades. And it was also the first crash involving a Boeing 787 Dreamliner. Could you talk about what makes this plane different from others?
So actually, if you look at the Dreamliner, it is one of the probably just 2 new wide-body jets that have entered service in the last 15 years or so. The other being the Airbus A350. By new wide-body jets, I mean a new platform altogether, because the earlier wide-bodies would be built on, would be improvements of previous platforms. So that way it's a modern and sophisticated jet. It has the fly-by-wire system where, you depend on electrical signals to operate the aircraft rather than doing it mechanically, which used to be the case with older generation aircraft. So, it surely was unique when it first entered service I think back in 2011. But now, the other modern jets are also sort of at par in terms of the sophistication, in terms of the systems. Notably, the Dreamliner was the first large aircraft, if I'm not wrong, the first wide body, which was primarily made of composite materials, new age lightweight materials, which also makes it a lot more fuel efficient, because if the aircraft weight is low, then you can go longer. And, Boeing and even other industry experts have talked about the safety features that have been there. There are redundancies, there are highly advanced alarms, warning systems on board. So, yeah, it is truly a new age jet, one of the first major aviation products to have come out in the 21st century.
And, obviously right now there are a lot of concerns around the plane and also a lot of concerns about Boeing itself, especially considering that it has faced a number of safety issues in the recent past. Could you perhaps cite some of those issues for our listeners?
So, yeah, there were two tragic accidents, before COVID, I think in 2018 and 2019. One was a Lion Air crash. One was an Ethiopian airline crash. But they did not involve the 787. They involved the latest version of Boeing's narrow body flagship, which is the Boeing 737. So these were Boeing 737 MAX aircraft. Eventually, what came to light was that Boeing had installed a system on those aircraft called MCAS, which would manage the angle of the attack of the aircraft. But they allegedly did not inform the airlines about the existence of such a system. So what it did was that due to some issues with the sensors, some data going wrong somewhere, the MCAS would get activated and push the nose of the aircraft down, whereas the pilots would not know that, such a system is doing it, and they would be struggling with the aircraft. And that had led to two catastrophic crashes, as I mentioned. So, yeah, Boeing has been under the scanner. There have been whistleblower complaints about problems with quality, problems with the components, the assembly process itself. There have been allegations that they've been cutting corners to keep the production rate high. And eventually that also led to a lot of regulatory action. The FAA got in and, regulated the production rate for Boeing aircraft. They also did a lot of inspections. Then there was another incident, again involving a MAX aircraft, where a door plug blew out while the aircraft was airborne. That was the Alaska Airlines incident.
Right. In fact, when we talk about whistleblowers, one of them, a Boeing engineer, he had raised concerns about the Dreamliner as well, right?
Yeah. In 2019, there were a couple of whistleblowers who also sort of came out, against the company with regard to the 787. In the John Barnett, who was a former Boeing quality manager, who had retired in 2017. And he had filed a whistleblower complaint about poor work around the wires that connect the aircraft's flight control systems. And he'd also alleged that damaged and substandard parts were being used. But in 2024, he died allegedly by suicide. So Boeing has, of course, on its part, rejected all these allegations. Then there was another whistleblower who was a Boeing engineer, Sam Salipor. He had come forward and alleged that sections of the fuselage of the Dreamliner were improperly connected, with the gaps that could, in an extreme circumstance, lead to the aircraft breaking apart. So after Sam's complaint, all 787 airplanes, which were at that time during the production system, the FAA had ordered a re-inspection of all of them. And earlier also in 2021 and 2022, for a few months, the FAA had halted the delivery of new Dreamliners to airline customers, while some other problems that had been pointed out were being addressed. So this is an ongoing process. So, let's see. The one thing that may be notable in the case of the Air India flight 171 is the fact that the aircraft was delivered to the airline back in January of 2014. So it had been in service for 11 and a half years.
Yeah, and you're right that this particular aircraft had over 41,000 hours of flying time under its belt. But like we mentioned earlier, there has been a lot of speculation about what went wrong. You have people online dissecting, all the videos that have come out. And one thing that a lot of people seem to have focused on is the positioning of the flaps. A lot of aviation experts are pointing out that they were not in the right position. Could you talk about what their contention has been?
Okay, so if I talk in layman terms, flaps would be extensions on the wings of the aircraft. So if you've ever sat on an aircraft close to the wing, you would see these surfaces that move. The wing is fixed, but at the end of the wing, there is a surface that moves. So those are called flaps. Now, flaps move based on the part of flight that the aircraft is in. So during landing, flaps are extended quite a bit because that sort of allows the aircraft speed to come down. During takeoff also, the flaps are positioned in such a way that when the aircraft is on its runway roll, the movement of the wind creates lift. So if the flaps are fully retracted, a not adequate lift would be available to the aircraft. So that is the point that a lot of people seem to be making right now, that the flaps seemed retracted, which should not have been the case. But again, an important caveat here, we do not know for sure whether the flaps are retracted or not. You've also seen the videos that have come out. Those videos are either CCTV footage from the Ahmedabad airport, some camera close to the runway, or it's an amateur video shot by, a teenager from one of the rooftops, I guess. It's very difficult to say what position the flaps were in at that point in time. And another thing, if the flap setting was not configured for takeoff, before, they started the takeoff, they have a detailed checklist that they go through. If for some reason the flaps were not configured for takeoff, there would have been a ruckus in the cockpit because the Dreamliner would have sounded alarms. They would have really sort of alerted the pilots that there was a problem. I mean, that is something that, of course, the investigators would be looking into. The other issue is, along with the flaps, the landing gear was down. And this is certain because, it's easy to spot the landing gear even on pixelated video. So the landing gear was down. It should not have been down. Now, it's anybody's guess why that happened. Some people would come out and say that, it was pilot error. There were some theories doing rounds that instead of retracting the landing gear immediately after takeoff, one of the pilots might have retracted the flaps. But
these are all speculations. We won't know until we know.
And pilots, are trained for hours and hours and hours on these. It's like muscle memory for them. So I don't know if that could be the case. Was it a major hydraulic or systems failure that did not allow the landing gear to come up? Or whether there was an emergency on board because of which the landing gear was not on the top of the mind of the pilots because they did not have enough time to react to the emergency? Was it a dual engine failure, which again would be a rarest of rare occurrences? Dual engine failures do not usually happen in modern jetliners, and these aircraft are sturdy and their engines are strong enough for them to sustain flight on a single engine for hours.
And also earlier you mentioned that teenager, right? His name is Aryan Ansari, and he was basically shooting a video on his terrace when he accidentally captured the airline. And that is actually one of the clearest videos we have of the plane. And you write that this particular video could end up helping investigators quite a bit. Could you talk about why that is the case?
So, earlier also a video had come out, and that again was, I think, shot by Aryan Ansari. But that was not a very sort of clear video. It was highly pixelated. But now for some reason, a clearer version of the video has come out. What that seems to be suggesting is that a device called the ram air turbine, which is the RAT, that had been deployed. Now, RAT is a small turbine that sort of comes down from the underbelly of the aircraft. Now, ram air turbines, they get deployed in the case of catastrophic failures of engines or major electrical failure or a massive hydraulic failure or a combination of any of these. Now, the deployment of the RAT is something that investigators would be really looking at, because that also to an extent extent would mean that the other theories, like, accidental retraction of flaps instead of the gear and all, that it might be too early to sort of jump to those sort of conclusions. Because if the RAT was deployed, then it means something seriously was wrong with, it suggests at least that there was something seriously wrong with the systems of the aircraft, that it could not have sustained flight. And RAT is more of a last resort in terms of, giving some power, some sort of communication ability and some power to the aircraft for the crew to manage a desperate situation.
And we talked about how the investigation will take some time. What do you think people should keep in mind until then?
I mean, it needs to be noted that the purpose of any air crash investigation is not to appropriate blame, but to identify the causes and then recommend the necessary safety measures to avoid recurrence of such accidents. Because, over 1,000 of these aircraft are flying globally. I'm talking about the 787s. If there was something wrong with the aircraft, then every airline operator, every regulator, every civil aviation body globally needs to be informed about the deficiency, if at all there was a deficiency, and then corrective action needs to be taken, which eventually makes flying safer. And flying has gotten safer and safer over the years because of air crash investigations. Some valuable inputs and safety recommendations come in, which then get built into the system. And then, you have a new baseline, a new normal. So, first we need to be very patient and we need to let the investigation run its course and not speculate, because speculation also sort of, creates some bit of panic.
Right, and talking about panic, a lot of people, have been concerned about flying. They have been concerned about Boeing. Anything that they should keep in mind?
So, in terms of flying, statistically, flying is the safest form of transportation that exists. It's a lot more likely that somebody, would die in a car crash or in a train accident, or even, if someone's a pedestrian walking on the road, than somebody dying in an air crash. The problem with air crashes is that they're often catastrophic. And they are rare. They are so rare that, whenever a major crash happens, it sort of shakes everyone up. So flying continues to be incredibly safe. It's a highly standardized and a highly professional industry. So it still remains the safest form of travel. I know it is a little unnerving right now, but I don't see any major reason to really worry. You have thousands and thousands of aircraft airborne every day at any given point in time.
And now, moving away from the Air India plane crash, we turn to another tragic incident that took place on Sunday. In Pune, at least 4 people, including a child, died after a 30-year-old iron bridge over the Indrayani River at Kundamala, a popular monsoon tourist spot, collapsed under the weight of weekend crowds. 38 others were injured during the incident, but witnesses say the number of casualties and those missing could be even higher. The collapse took place when nearly 100 to 200 people were reportedly on the bridge, plunging dozens into the rain-fed, fast-moving waters below. Now, despite warnings, the bridge was packed with people taking selfies, shooting videos, and even two-wheeler riders trying to squeeze through, which led to arguments and making matters worse. But that, though, wasn't the only issue. Turns out the bridge had long been flagged as structurally unsound by both local authorities and residents. In this segment, the Indian Express's Parthasarathi Biswas breaks down the sequence of events that led to the collapse and the warnings that went unheeded. Partha, for those who are unfamiliar with this tourist site, could you start by talking about where is Kundamala located and what kind of tourist attraction it sees during the holidays?
Kundamala is a small area. It is not a very popular, but it's one of those offbeat places where you go and which has been gaining traction in the recent days thanks to the explosion of Instagram, Reels and everything. Kundamala geographically or geologically is an interesting place. Now this place, the river Indrayani, cuts across the bed and creates whirlpools. It's almost like a very mini Grand Canyon because you have quaint rock structures. Because of erosion over the years, some whirlpool-like structures are created. The beauty of Kundamala can really be seen during the monsoon and also during the summer season. During the summer season, the unique rock sculptures that has been formed because of erosion can be seen, while during the monsoon, there are small waterfalls, there are small whirlpools, all these things can be seen. It's a small area which is 30 kilometers from Pune and around 15 kilometers from Pimpri-Chinchwad. It's a very picturesque place. It does not have a wide road or anything for access, but it can be accessed through village roads and small village pathways. And there is a temple dedicated to a goddess, and there was this bridge which connected both sides of the river. Overall, it's one of those supposed hidden gem which is not hidden anymore, but it's pretty unique and picturesque.
Right, and so far we know that at least 4 people have lost their lives due to this bridge collapse. So, can you talk about the events that led up to this collapse?
So this bridge was constructed in around 1992, and this bridge was constructed to connect both sides of the river. There is a village and the river divides the village. The village has seen a lot of growth in terms of dairy, in terms of industries, in terms of everything. So in order to connect the village, this bridge was constructed in 1992. Now, this bridge originally was meant for people to walk. That is, it was supposed to be a pedestrian bridge. But most of the two-wheelers, they used this bridge to cross the river. Now, the local villagers or local residents say that the other access for them is almost 15 kilometers away. It's a detour of 15 kilometers. And if they don't take their two-wheelers to, say, ferry milk or ferry essentials, they'll have to travel for more 15 kilometers to go to the other side. Now, on Saturday, as I told you, it is one of those hidden gem kind of a place which is not hidden anymore. Many people had gone there. So when this incident happened at around 3:20, from what the collector told us was there were around 150 people on the bridge. As I mentioned, the bridge is mostly for people to walk, and it is not advisable for two-wheelers to use the bridge, but people have been using it. At that time, there were around 50 people on the bridge who were either taking pictures or standing, looking at the small gorges, the small waterfall or whatever, when this bridge collapsed. Now, the backstory of this, or the story behind the story, is that some people said that 10 days back, the bridge was vibrating and the bridge was not stable. So there were some kind of traction, some kind of wires or bars or something to put up to stabilize the bridge. On either side of the bridge, they had pasted signboards asking people to be careful and not take their bikes on the bridge. However, no one heeded to those warnings. And at around 3:20 or 3:30, the bridge collapsed. The bridge is in 2 portions. So you have portion 1, portion 2. They connect the both sides of the river. So the first portion collapsed completely. It just snapped. And the people who were there on this portion of the bridge, they came down into the river bed. The first call to the control room, that is 1077, had gone at around 3:20, and the first response team, which included NDRF and the ambulance and others, reached there in around 20 minutes.
And earlier you said that locals say the bridge was already rusting and was visibly unsafe. So why were people still using the bridge if there were these warning signs?
Yesterday, the Minister for Water Resources, Girish Mahajan, was there, and he told us that the state government had passed a tender of 7 to 8 crores to build a new bridge. Now, this bridge was being used till the work of this was to commence soon. However, due to the exceptionally heavy rainfall which had happened in Maharashtra from this month of May onwards, the work could not start on time. Now, why people were using it, as I mentioned, the detour that was available is an addition of 15 kilometers, so the locals avoided it. And for the tourists, this was an attraction. If you stand there and take a picture, or if you stand there and cross the sides, it's kind of a thrilling thing. It's kind of a picturesque effect you get on your pictures. So people were using it. Now, there were 2 signboards which were put up either entrances of the bridge, asking people not to take their two-wheelers and other things, but there was laxity in terms of implementation of this plan. Around 7 days back, the collector of Pune had in fact issued prohibitory orders under the relevant section of BNS, asking people to be away from water bodies, especially water bodies. As I mentioned, during the monsoon, a lot of these non-perennial rivers and water bodies, they come alive, and people go there to visit. Last year, we had our whole family wiped out during a sudden flood in Lonavala, and post that there have been police and the district administration have been active in trying to prevent the recurrence of these activities, and one of them was issuance of the prohibitory orders. The minister who visited Mr. Mahajan, Girish Mahajan, he mentioned the order and he said action would be taken if there was no policeman posted near the bridge to prevent people from coming onto the bridge. But while some officers told us there was a policeman, but we now know that there were people on the bridge and there was no action taken or no step taken to prevent people getting onto the bridge.
And we understand that the bridge falls under the Dehu Road Cantonment Board, but its upkeep and monitoring have been in question. So can you tell us who was technically responsible for the safety of the bridge?
That also is a grey area. Yesterday, one of the officials of Zilla Parishad admitted that they really don't know who is supposed to take care of the bridge. The area falls under the defense establishment. It's not a cantonment board, it's the cantonment. And that side of Pune has a lot of cantonments. You have the Dehu Ordnance Depot, you have a few other military establishments who own the land there. Now, the construction of the bridge was done by Zilla Parishad, but who was supposed to take care of the bridge or to do the yearly keep or everything, that seems to be not clear till now. Deputy Chief Minister had said there is going to be an inquiry, and if they find any kind of fault with the officials, action will be taken. But that is a normal thing to say after every accident. I mean, after an accident, we normally hear our ministers and everyone assuring of action. But till that, I have not seen. Like, there was a bridge collapse in Mahad. I don't know how many officials or political party leaders were fined for that. Then last year at that Lonavala accident, I don't know how many police people or policemen were penalized or suspended because of dereliction of duty. So while the announcement has been made that there is going to be action, a lot remains to be seen, whether the action is just on paper or whether they do identify people who have not done their duty and due action is taken. A lot seems to be still in the air.
And Partha, during your reportage, you spoke to survivors and locals there. So what did they have to say about this mishap?
You know, the saddest part of the whole story is that their lives just changed in a snap of a second. Like, for example, we have a case in which a lady and her whole family had gone there. The lady is in a hospital. She's pretty serious, but she has already lost her husband and her very young 5-year-old son. The body of the son was fished out yesterday. The lady, I don't think she yet knows about it. The other survivors whom we spoke to, who were lucky enough to escape with little or no injuries, they said, like, you know, it almost seemed like the bridge snapped. It almost looked like the snapping of a matchstick. For 1 second, everything was fine. They were enjoying the beautiful view, and the next second, the whole bridge just snapped and came down. They didn't know how things went wrong or what happened, but they did mention that there was a lot of flying of two-wheelers. There were a lot of people on the bridge, and many of them are yet to come to terms with it, which is but natural.
And finally, we turn to the official timeline for India's next census. The Union Home Ministry has announced that India's 16th census will now be held in 2027, putting an end to speculation over the delay. This marks the country's 8th decennial census since independence, with the last one conducted back in 2011. The 2021 edition was postponed due to the pandemic, and the delay has raised concerns about planning, representation, and how resources are allocated. Now, according to the latest announcement by the Home Ministry, the reference date for most of the country will be the 1st of March 2027. But for snowbound or non-synchronous regions like Ladakh, parts of Jammu and Kashmir, Himachal Pradesh, and Uttarakhand, it will be the 1st of October 2026. What makes the 2027 census particularly significant is the inclusion of a nationwide caste count, the first of its kind since 1931. This development has major policy and political implications and is expected to be closely watched. According to the government, the census will be conducted in 2 phases. Phase 1 will cover house listing. This will include gathering data on housing conditions, assets, and access to basic services. While Phase 2 will involve population enumeration, collecting demographic, social, and economic details of every individual. Now, the scale of the exercise is massive, one that will be carried out by nearly 34 lakh enumerators and supervisors and 1.3 lakh additional functionaries. Needless to say, this is one of the most extensive administrative undertakings anywhere in the world. Also, for the first time, the enumeration will be digitally executed using mobile applications. And there will also be a self-enumeration option so people can fill in their details online. The ministry has noted that stringent data security protocols will be in place throughout. You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and produced by Shashank Bhargava and me, Ichha Sharma. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio and write to us at podcast@indianexpress.com.